St. Angela was the foundress of the Ursulines in 1535 in Brescia, Italy. And really, it was a revolutionary approach to communities. They were women who lived with their families and in their neighborhoods, and their role was to support the women and the children, and to come together once a month for support of each other. There was no convent, there was no structure really, except they believed that God called them to be consecrated women in the world.
I came to know St. Angela gradually. I didn't know about St. Angela before I entered the community, and it took me several years to learn her story as a young woman in northern Italy in the 1500s who was orphaned as a young child and lost her sister as well, and opened herself up to what God had in store for her because of those losses. I think her openness to respond to the possibilities for women in the 1500s, that they could make a contribution to the world and to the church and to the cities in which the Ursulines were first established, came from her early loss and her willingness to be open. And that was evident from the way in which she set up her company. And she actively engaged the laymen and the laywomen of her time to be part of this movement. And so she imagined something that didn't exist.
So St. Angela, in what she did, was so important because of helping women to help themselves and not have to either get married or join a convent, because those were the only choices that women had in those days. And so I admired that very much.
That changed about 50 years after St. Angela died, and the Charles Borromeo, who we have a window dedicated to Charles, he was the Archbishop in Milan, and he felt that to protect them, they needed to be enclosed. They needed to be in community. So the Ursulines followed that plan and became communities, but we became independent communities. So when a group would move to another area, they would become their own financial and their own structure.
And when that happened, the folks who had been with St. Angela and been part of that work said, well, what are we going to do, So that's how the educational part, as far as classroom teaching and boarding schools, came about. And that's how the Ursulines have been known for their education. Although a lot of times they'll say it's because of St. Angela. Well, it was in one sense, but at any rate, that's historically important to me.
And then 300 years later, Julia Chatfield in England ends up in a boarding school in France where she meets the Ursulines. And she experienced the loss of her family relationships when she decided that she was called to be Catholic, and they disowned her. So I think for both Angela and Julia, they were pioneer women. They were women who had good imaginations for how women and girls could be supported in living their lives. And I admire both of them and the ways in which they let go of what might have been a very different story if they didn't have the losses that they had.
Bishop Purcell had gone to Boulogne-sur-Mer to invite Ursulines to come, because he knew that if the population was not educated, it would not thrive. And so he invited several teaching communities, and Ursulines were one of those communities. And that's when Julia heard the story of Ohio and the need for educators. She had already been disowned by her own family. She was an English woman, had given up her country. And I think when she heard that invitation, she immediately felt a call to come. And it took them a while to get the bishop in France to agree to let them come. And I think that whole time, she just knew that this was what she was called to do. So at age 36, she led the group of Ursulines and helped build the community sense between the two communities. It was two communities that joined forces, the Ursulines of Boulogne-sur-Mer and the Ursulines of Beaulieu. They were on a boat for 29 days. They had studied English, they had shared common time and experiences, and so by the time they got here, they really were a pretty united front and believed that Julia really was the one to lead them. And she led for 30 years. She was superior for 30 years. When they came to Cincinnati, they weren't sure where they were gonna be as far as the bishop's intent for them. Chillicothe was one option, Dayton was another option, but they had made a pact. The sisters, the 11 of them, had made a pact that where the bishop sent them, it would be his decision, and they would take that as God's grace. And so when he finally determined that it would be Brown County, I think they were true to their word. They accepted it as the will of God, and so came and really came pretty quickly. He made that decision on July 16th, and they were here by July 21st because they wanted to begin.
When these sisters first arrived in the 1800s from France, they came to the community of Brown County to educate primarily children in the beginning. But they also came with a determination to serve the broader needs of the community in any way that they could. And they came with a deep faith in their religion and a deep understanding that they were doing the work that their order and that their church believes is central to being human. And with great courage and determination, they came here and provided the service that they wanted to provide. One of the remarkable things about the Ursulines is that they never lost sight of what it is they wanted to accomplish, but they changed how they did it over time in the face of changing realities.
The Ursulines were visionaries, as exemplified by the fact that they came here to this wilderness in 1845 from civilization in Europe. And they saw then what was the potential. When they sat down in the grounds that became their cemetery, they said, this is our first resting place and it will become our last resting place. And after they had 3 girls in school that fall, there's been an educational operation on this campus until the college finally closed 3 years ago. They helped start the public education system in Brown County. So they were involved actively as much as they could be and as long as they could be. Sister Xavier Ladrigan was one of the founders of the Brown County Chamber of Commerce 40 years ago. So that was another way they were involved. And they were on various committees and organizations and charitable activities and government agencies serving people throughout Brown County and in adjacent counties as well.
When the search committee interviewed me for the the role of president at Chatfield College, they asked me if I had any relevant experience for closing the college. And they wanted to know how I would approach that. I was stunned. I was at 35 at the time, and I had not had experience closing an institution, but it gave me a clue that it was a fragile place. And I remember I replied and said, I don't know exactly how I would close it, but I do know that if it was meant to close, I would not try to keep it open. And it was a challenging first few years. There were financial challenges, there were enrollment challenges, but we got through it, and I think I have 5 successors after me. So the college continued to exist and now has evolved into Chatfield Edge, which is a wonderful testimony to the responsiveness of the board of Chatfield Edge and the leadership there.
When I retired in 2019, no one knew the world would change 3 months later with COVID. But Chatfield was always kind of on the edge. We had challenges because our model was different. The college had the same accreditation requirements as the University of Cincinnati and Xavier University. And for a school of a couple hundred students with a minimal budget, minimal staff, I knew that was going to be a challenge. And I also saw schools close, including the College of New Rochelle, which was an Ursuline school. Subsequently, Notre Dame College. These are 100-year-old plus colleges started by communities of sisters 100 years ago, and they're closing. And one of the things that often occurs is they close sometimes in the middle of the night with unpaid bills and breached covenants with banks. And the Chatfield folks, to their credit, and the sisters got out ahead of that and said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to assess the times. St. Angela said change with the times. And they were prescient and saw what was happening and able to pivot to something different, but something consistent with the ministry, the mission, the charism of the Ursulines. And I'm proud that they did that. Did it hurt? Yeah, we had a lot invested in maintaining that accreditation and maintaining those college classes and the college curriculum, but it wasn't meant to be. It wasn't part of God's plan, and this is what Chatfield is now, and it's a great institution, and hopefully it'll go on for another 100 years or more.
Chatfield, like many, many two-year colleges around the country, had been experiencing declining enrollments for probably the last 8 to 10 years. As time went by, it became clear that we couldn't ignore those facts. Chatfield Edge, like Chatfield College, needed financial support in order to continue. And unless the sisters and the people who had been supporting Chatfield College believed that we were honoring the legacy of the college, we would not have been able to do anything. I mean, it's just, they had to believe we were sincere. We were clearly following the mission. It was the same mission as Chatfield College. It was just going to be delivered in a somewhat different way.
The hope for the Chatfield Edge is, first, to meet the people that we serve where they are, based on their need. And that need may be from a listening ear, i.e. a mentor, to financial support, maybe even to the opportunity for them to achieve their academic goals, to then give back to their own respective families, communities, and the world. So I think that the transition was difficult, in some cases disappointing, not only for the sisters, but the community and myself. But I think that when we stayed aligned with the mission, and the sisters let us know, here's what the mission is. Again, it's not a 10-year, 20-year, 30-year mission, but here's a mission that is going to live on beyond any of our own lives. And I believe that the Ursulines of Brown County, as well as Chatfield Edge, they really provided me a platform to be my best self, to be engaged with communities that I'm less familiar with, building comfort around that, really connecting with students that I may be more familiar with, but not as connected to through proximity. And so I had an opportunity here to really get connected and align my own personal mission with the mission of the Chatfield Edge and the Ursulines of Brown County.
My family has 10 people who went to Chatfield and attended Chatfield. My grandmother, after raising 10 children, decided she wanted to take classes at Chatfield. And then her children took classes and her grandchildren. And it's gone through the family, and it's changed our lives in so many ways. A friend told me about the mentor program that was starting at Chatfield Edge, and that piqued my interest. And then another friend told me she was volunteering. So I immediately sent an email, and the next day I was in the office signing up to be a mentor. And I feel like it's come full circle, and I'm hoping that my words of advice and my encouragement will help future scholars as well. Being someone who can be there with them in person or on the other end of the phone is something that you don't always get these days with distance learning and online classes. So I think that human touch, that personal interaction, not just someone that they chat to or send texts to, but someone they can actually speak to or meet with makes a huge difference.
The one thing that always struck me about this organization is the mission focus. We excel at mission. No matter what, mission comes first. A lot of places give mission lip service. We live it here, and that goes back to the Ursuline legacy and all the work that they've been able to complete on this property and in this area for this community. Well, the Ursulines are very unique in terms of their educational curriculum, and harkening back to the boarding school, and they were predominantly centered on working with women and young ladies. And so their curriculum involved a lot of STEM, science, technology, mathematics, on top of arts and creativity. And they're about developing the whole person. That's part of what our mission is today at the Chatfield Edge. We want to develop the whole person. That goes back into the legacy of the Ursuline sisters here in this community.
Like Angela, Marici, the foundress, her epiphany was that the world could be made better, society could be made stronger through the education of girls and women, because they bring a different perspective. I think everyone who has been in contact with the Ursulines of Brown County, still carries these threads, this generosity of spirit, also this fearlessness of spirit with them. And it's touched so many people so profoundly.
I think what I came to understand in those first years was that Chatfield was serving a population that no other college was serving in the area. We basically were serving people who either did not have the money to go to a traditional four-year college, or they didn't have the time. Everything about the college was designed to support people who were busy, people who were parents, people who had other lives outside of Chatfield, and it enabled them, the way in which we offered the classes and the way in which the faculty interacted with them, enabled them to be successful in situations that would not be typically served by a four-year college. I think that idea is a very relevant one, and I think Chatfield Edge is going to continue to attract people who do not have the experience, do not have people in their families who can help them with that, and Chatfield Edge is a wonderful resource.